Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball! Hello, everyone. Again, welcome to the Don Sullivan Show as we continue to pile up all kinds of different subject matters within the overall umbrella of science, technology, and computing. Today, we're going to go a little bit peripheral, even I might say digression, because you know I never do anything like that. And we're going to have a discussion about a book that is unbelievably important, a book that is something that everyone should read, but most importantly, those people who aspire to actually high-end public service. And that's all I'm going to say about that subject, because my wonderful guest here, somebody the Don Sullivan Show audience knows really well, Sean Campbell, who went with me all the way up Mount Kilimanjaro, and Steve is here. And by the way, Steve, now we have actually we actually now have three guests, or including me, of the Don Sullivan Show that have taken themselves up to 19,000.
You keep getting these mountain climbers
since
on.
We had
I'm going to have to.
On the other day. We have
thought you were going to say
people.
3 guests from New Jersey.
Well, we have a lot of guests from New Jersey, and that's a whole different story.
Yeah, there's New Jersey ones.
But we've had 3 people that have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So
I feel left out. I'm going to have to start hiking more.
You can do that too with me, although I don't think I want to do that one again. But there's other things you can do. Right? There's plenty of
I told Sean I'd probably throw up on the ride over.
Going to Nepal next February. We're going out of Panora Base Camp. Many opportunities for Don Sullivan shows there too, and we will do that. Okay, so let's do the disclaimer, because Sean's one of the lawyers who has made me have this disclaimer. By the way, I shouldn't.
The lawyers you're always complaining about on the episodes.
The vast array of the different law firms that are browbeating the Don Sullivan Show into doing things to protect ourselves and our intellectual property. So all statements and hosts and guests and lawyers on the Don Sullivan Show are the personal opinions of the host, the guest, and the lawyers, who all agree that the following content is the property of Zanalytics LLC to be used publicly and exclusively on the Don Sullivan Show. And even the lawyer is shaking his head yes, that the audience can't see. So we're good with that. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So there we go.
It's always got to do your due diligence.
Sean helped me write that, by the way, now 2 years ago. So, okay. So what we want to talk about here is a book called Physics of Future Presidents, but I'm going too fast here, and I have to let Steve actually do our sponsors and say hello. So Jersey Steve,
it's true.
I'll slow down.
It's true.
And you can take it over for a few minutes. Do it.
I know you're excited about our first book club episode. I am too. Well, greetings from the Garden State, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. You can learn more at licensefortress.com, and please support our producer by visiting axedinc.com. That's AXTINK.com. Subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation, and win the Big Greek Games competition by beating the jocks with clever, elaborate pranks. How about that, Don?
That could mean a lot of things these days, right? He's not in the women's competition. Make sure of that.
I have no idea. We'll have to check in with them.
All right, Sean, say hello and reveal to the audience of the Don Sullivan Show what it is that you do and what it is that you aspire to do. Even though, remember, Sean was all the way up Kilimanjaro with us, and fortunately, he did not bring home the stowaways that I brought home for a few weeks, and he was very healthy. Although I did visit Sean after I got back, and
I was really hurting, but it was yet to manifest itself in its extremely ugly face. So again, I digress. Go for it, Sean. Tell us.
That's
Say
right.
hello.
So I it's nice to speak to the audience yet again, this time from the United States. And want to talk about physics. I aspire to learn more about physics and its practical applications in the world. Now, here's what you have to understand is physics was my least favorite subject in high school by far, to the point that if you want to hack my United account, one of the security questions is, what was your least favorite subject in school? And the password is physics. If Dr. Zubov, if you're listening, I am so sorry for those extended
And I taught physics
breaks
in high school, by the way, and supposedly I'm this guy's mentor in some way. So obviously I failed in that regard, but
Well, no, you didn't, because it took a long time. So in 2015, you suggested that I buy the book Physics for Future Presidents. So I did. And I read 2 pages and I wasn't ready for it yet. Flash forward 11 years later, and there's just so much going on between uranium enrichment and data centers and rising utility bills in the state of New Jersey and a whole host of subjects. And suddenly I'm like, I really want to dive into physics. And I know I am hiking with a former physics teacher up Mount Kilimanjaro in a couple weeks at this point. So I take Physics for Future Presidents off the shelf. And lo and behold, it is captivating. And I'm like, wow, I can get into this.
So folks,
I want to know
just
about
go out
this.
there and envision the two of us layered in about 6 layers of clothes with hot water bottles underneath these double plied sleeping bags, and the lights are off, and Sean has a light, and he's reading this stuff, asking me questions as we're exhausted from the day's journey at 15,000 feet. So,
and he's explaining things like isotopes and how protons move, and 3 Mile Island, and radioactivity, and half-lives. And see, the thing is, I've come to appreciate is that if you want to go into public service, or you're interested really in anything at a certain executive level, if you are asked what's the difference between a watt and a kilowatt and a gigawatt, and you go, what? It's probably not.
that was good, Sean. Throwing in the puns there. Yeah.
I like it.
Is that if you think a half-life refers to a midlife crisis, it's not for you.
So everyone in the vast audience of Don Sullivan Show should read this book, and I would say multiple times. And so Dr. Richard Muller, who I would love to have on the Don Sullivan Show, if you're out there, ping me and we'll get you on, decided from having taught a class for many, many years that this was a book that needed to be written, because so many people who aspired to or achieved high office, present company included, had no clue whatsoever about the basic fundamentals of real science. And so this is something, of course, we see manipulated tremendously and exaggerated in the mainstream media. So this book, actually more than any other book I have ever read, gives you the fundamental, to this day, because it's 20 years old now, the fundamental understanding of what you need to understand about everything in the world of science. And then you'll make your own decisions about what climate change means, about what energy means, about what nuclear power means, all these things. It's absolutely wonderful. So, Sean, you can go on now. Tell me, what I want to know from you is, what has been the biggest impact? And I won't get into the geek stuff, or maybe I will, but I'll try not to. What has been the biggest impact in the content of this book on you over the last 11 years as you've been reading it?
Right. Those 2 pages back in 2015, and then the rest of it, 2026. Yes. Rereading the first 2 pages. Honestly, it's the fact that this is a bulwark against propaganda. We need to have a sober starting point to understand this information. You have to understand some basic terminology and some basic concepts. And I've seen in the past how the propaganda gets spun in all sorts of ways, and we're so emotionally charged about, these different topics in different ways. And so if you don't have this basis, you really can't have like that Watt joke, that dad joke I just made. But it matters. If you're trying to really dive into energy policy and figure out what's going to be best, you really, at a basic level, need to know what a kilowatt is. And it would be a fascinating polling question to know how many legislators know what that is.
It would be fascinating and frightening at the same time, because very few of them really would, although they would answer, but they would be wrong.
Yes.
And go ahead. Please go. This is your time. I want to hear what you think, because it's so important, because again, you aspire to be something very significant in our public discourse. And this book was written for you.
You can't not be day one ready. The topics discussed in the book become incredibly important, not just in discussing energy supply, but in moments of crisis. And your number one job is to keep people safe and be steady and sober. And you have to be able to calmly explain with a degree of detail, but not overwhelming detail, but a degree that there's immediate comprehension where the layman can understand.
As opposed to the consensus that you hear about on mainstream and cable news.
Yes, that's right. You have to be able to show your work as well. And the thing is, to be day one ready, you can't be learning what kilowatts are after the crisis.
Or an isotope.
You can't be briefed after the fact. You have to know before the crisis.
Like right now, understanding what depleted versus enriched uranium means is probably a good thing for the general public, and certainly public leaders to know, right?
I would think so. It also would affect decisions you'd make about voting and.
Well, I mean, you don't want to be sitting in the Situation Room and asking the generals and the admirals who you're about to tell to bomb the living hell out of some obscure place in the world, what is really the difference between U-238 and U-235, and how does this work? You want to understand it.
Right, and at least be able to have the awareness of knowing what you don't know and being able to ask the questions.
That's right.
You don't have to be a detailed, high-end technical expert that spent 10 years studying this. Although, Don, do you feel that Jimmy Carter's engineering experience as a nuclear engineer helped him be
in a backdoor way, right, trying to get me to compliment Jimmy Carter? And yes,
just to be clear to the public,
I will do it.
This is my he is the Democrat who's the exception to the rule.
Well, certainly in this narrow area,
tenure,
he absolutely was a real nuclear engineer and a hero nuclear engineer.
Seemed like a good guy.
Although he was a terrible president. He was a true hero nuclear engineer, and he did absolutely understand everything that we're talking about. He did not need to read this book. But I assure you...
But he also knew how to micromanage every situation, probably including the 3 Mile Island, which was good in 3 Mile Island or Camp David or, certain things, maybe not other things, but that could be debated.
Well, yeah, and what we have now, obviously, is a president who makes things up as he goes along. He's a self-promote. He's mostly interested in self-promotion, mostly interested in deal-making, and knows very little intentionally, because it's not got nothing to do with his intelligence. He knows very little intentionally about much of the substance that we're talking about here. But unfortunately, you go back to the presidents of the last 30 years, they didn't even care for the most part to know about much of this. And they should. They need to, as we're saying.
Well, the personality type you just described is about half of the venture capital CEOs that I deal with on a regular basis in my legal and investing work. They really can be categorized into two groups, those who read and those who don't read. And you can interpret that as broadly as you wish. The other end of that, and I'll bring this back in a second, is you see that press conference that Rubio gave the other day?
I see a lot of them, and he's incredibly prepared on pretty much everything, but go ahead.
And he can explain calmly what the purpose is of what we're doing. He can explain with the right degree of detail. He can show the work. You have to be able to show your work. And the other thing with some of the scientific elements here is a lot of this is risk mitigation, right? I mean, this is what we saw in COVID and other things. There may be a point where we have to tell the public, look, the level of radiation that leaked out from something is this. we project that this may cause, in the aggregate, a certain excess number of cancer deaths measured at this. Now, the personal injury lawyers are going to go sue me for saying that, but you get the point. So we'll figure that out. But then we give people freedom. We explain all the facts, and they also get to choose, all right, how do they want to respond to this? Do they want to live with the extra 10 cases of excess cancer deaths that may exist? Do they want to move away? Do they want to take other lifestyle factors that may reduce their risk of cancer in other ways? Look at this holistically, take a totality of factors. When we understand the underlying information, we can communicate that soberly.
As opposed to just panicking blindly because of something they heard on a talk show.
That's right.
That would devolve, I think, maybe because I'm cynical.
Well, it would still devolve. Don't get me wrong.
It would devolve into a mask, until it would get into like the mask debate, because like
of course
people would
be
like, oh, you come into my house, you could give me radiation
at the same time.
Well, again, Stephen, remember, one of the main impetuses for the Don Sullivan Show is the fact that people did not understand how what a virus was as compared to bacteria. They just didn't understand it. And the great majority of people didn't understand the fact that the analogies that I used, that using a N95 mask even to actually try to stop a virus was the equivalent of using a chain link fence to try to stop a mosquito. And they could, if they understand that, then they can still make their own choices. However, they do, but they didn't understand it at all to begin with. And I'm talking about 99% of the general public, not just the public leaders. They didn't.
Well, yeah. And we're getting into, how the media treats
not political.
science
that's
and
just
portrays.
a fact. And,
No. But even the other element of it, like if you're in the deal making, whether in politics or business, what really helps is understanding what you're negotiating.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I've seen that work to great effect.
You can get taken advantage of if there are things you don't know.
You need the information advantage. You can't just, we won't get into my cameo.
And what's important here is, as I've kind of been derisive towards the present occupant of the White House, but 47 is so much better prepared than 45 because he has people around him, in the case in point that you're just describing about energy, like Doug Bergen, who does understand everything about the science and the policies of energy in general. And so that really helps, as opposed to what it was like, 7 years ago when he was trying to fumble around and just put on a show.
Is there an area of science or physics, Sean, that you feel like is most propagandized or misunderstood? And maybe that's a tough question. I don't know, but just out of curiosity, there's probably a lot of difference.
You get to say climate change, but that's okay. I won't answer for you. Yes, I will. Go ahead.
That's where my mind went. Then again, I try not to pay attention to the propaganda anyway, even though I know it's there. Because at the end of the day, like, for example, I don't like to listen to myself talk or read things about. So like the Kilimanjaro, haven't listened to that episode yet because I don't want to hear what I had to say.
It's a good episode. I like that episode.
All 5 of them. The 5th one being the worst, but that is.
But if you listen to the buzz too much, you lose focus on, the actual substance of what you
can't see the forest from the trees.
You need somebody whispering in your ears.
But as a public leader or somebody aspiring to, you have to know what is being said out there so you can address it.
Yes,
right?
but it can. Yes, you do, of course. But you don't have to be consuming it actively on a social media account every day. Not that.
Well, that just seems unhealthy in general. As studies keep showing.
That's the social sciences.
Yeah. I don't know too many people that consume social media on the regular that seem like they're well off, to be honest.
Well, it's funny.
But we have to use it to get this information out soberly. So
it's important.
You use the example
like a moderation
of Rubio,
thing.
and that's perfect. Yeah. In that he is so easy to listen to, and he is so prepared, and he knows everything that he is trying to say, and he says it in a way that he can communicate, like he's a big rap music fan. And the answer, I don't know if you heard this, but one of the
Insane
reporters,
Insane in the Brain.
One of the reporters
is that Cypress Hill?
Yeah.
Well, one of the reporters asked him what his DJ name was because he played DJ at a wedding the other day, and he looked at him and said, "You're not ready for my DJ name." And he just went on. And he can do things like that because he is. And if you've listened to interviews about rap music with him, again, you can actually learn a lot because he is so able to speak on a level that everybody can understand everything he's saying, which is what we try to endeavor to do here on this show. And that's what, public leaders want to endeavor to do. And that's why this book is so important, to give you the basic foundations so that when a crisis happens or when a policy is being advocated, you can make those arguments without being a geek.
That's right. And I would say with the Rubio, you can take anything he says and you can tell it in a 30-second, social media reel, and it would have that same clarity and it would have a conclusion. It would make a point.
All right. So
he's incredibly concise.
Continue. We've kind of digressed here. I don't do that very much, but go back to what you were answering with Steve's question about what you have found to be the most important in regards to helping what hopefully will be your constituency understand a particular point of view or a particular aspect of science, something that you're not promoting, but you're just trying to get the basic facts out there before you promote.
Well, I think there's several pillars to leadership in that kind of context. We should be saving the public money, keeping the public safe, and allowing the public to flourish. And a lot of this comes down to economics too. Are we making the decisions right now that are going to promote proper energy supply, or are we making decisions that are going to actually further constrain energy supply at a time where we're already talking about it being limited? And if we do the latter, our energy costs will continue to death spiral, and we'll have, Havana-style energy. So understanding this stuff and then weaving in economics into it is really critical.
All wars are economic, and that obviously extends into a much greater set of every conflict, not just wars. In fact, every discussion about something that is not 100% agreed upon is economic. And so therefore you're right. And I can't imagine anything more important than energy policy that fits underneath that.
Well, it's national security too.
So I guess my question is, and getting into some of the details of this, to not become an advocate one way or another, because we are going to have, when we have the right people on, complete series that will be in great depth on energy policy, on climate change and what that really means, on what various different forms of energy have as a fully encumbered cost to them. What have you learned now that you wouldn't have learned before, fully understanding that you might have come from the right of center perspective to begin with, but what have you learned recently, mostly from either having read the parts of this book that are relevant or having researched yourself beyond that?
Well, one of the things I like in looking at any landscape is the number of options available. So here, thinking about the different pros and cons of different energy sources, for example, renewable, solar, natural gas.
Nuclear, bio.
Nuclear,
tidal even. There's so much.
And when you think about the different pros and cons of these things, and then just on a tangent for a second, but thinking about the propaganda piece we were talking about earlier, we're finally getting back to the idea of building nuclear. We went away from that for 45 years after 3 Mile Island. Would you say that's correct in your estimation, Don? And maybe that wasn't necessary. Maybe we didn't need to do that, and maybe propaganda led us there.
Well, Chernobyl made it 10 times worse. And
that didn't help.
Fukushima made it 100 times worse. But yes, they were all very understandable, tangible mistakes, which, to be honest, the content in this book and those chapters would make obvious.
Yes. But thinking about when you start to have your color palette that you can play with, right? Now you're going to go paint. You could think differently. So I mentioned earlier energy supply and demand. We're focused a lot on energy generation, but I'm also thinking about the grid and where things get backed up. How do we improve energy transmission? I don't particularly know the answer, but once you have a basic understanding, your brain as a layman starts to say, maybe I need to approach this on not the demand side, but the supply side. How do I increase the velocity of supply? And then as a venture capital, someone with a venture capital background, I go and think, I wonder what innovations are going on out there, what technologies we can deploy to look at that and even try at a pilot level. Because maybe if we address energy transmission through the grid, maybe that's a 6-month solution rather than a 10-year solution. So absolutely, let's get the nuclear power plant going again somewhere. But maybe in the meantime, while we're doing that, that's quite a project. Maybe there's some less invasive energy transmission type approaches we can take. So what I'm trying to impart here is I'm trying to show my own work, right? This is how my brain is approaching this. This is how I'm thinking about this. And again, it's not about being a technical expert, but it's about showing the work and explaining to others how you're thinking about this.
And you know the questions to ask now, whereas you would not necessarily have asked the questions or known what questions to ask before.
Breaking it down very logically.
Psychologists refer to that as conscious incompetence. So you know exactly what to ask.
That's true.
Which is a comfortable place to be, actually, because your unconscious incompetence is
that's the worst.
Awareness, lack of emotional intelligence. That's worse.
It's humility.
Yeah.
It's humility in being able to bring in experts that you trust of one kind or another as a public leader, for example, and that's what this book is about, to be able to get the legitimate information that allows you to lead forth and develop a policy that becomes something that you have to promote and sell and becomes a staple of whatever administration you have or whatever paradigm of public leadership you were involved in.
Well, what's interesting is in New Jersey right now, if you go and look at legislation that's been proposed, and I'm talking about bills that maybe have just been introduced but haven't made their way through any sort of legislative hurdles. There's one from a Democrat right now, and I'm not a Democrat, but there's one from a Democrat that is trying to address energy transmission and has interest in this. And it's fascinating to me that hasn't been picked up.
That's the attenuation, the heat loss of energy through wide open transmission lines. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
We've been doing it the same way for 125 years in terms of energy transmission, and there really hasn't been any improvement since. Why is that?
That's right. And, again, not knowing the exact subject matter, but I've done in my venture capital days a number of financings representing investors, institutional investors investing into energy-based startups. I know there are people working on this stuff in all different ways, and the disconnect between that world and public infrastructure is vast. And what I'm seeing too much of right now, for example, in 2026 in New Jersey, is we're passing a lot of orders that allow committees to form to study things. We shouldn't need all the extra time to study. I think we needed to have done the studying already, or we just need to find the people who have studied it and start taking action.
That's a great point. Find the people who have studied it. Find the real experts as opposed to people that you're just close to. Go out and recruit. I think, Sean, you and I have developed a term called talent harvesting. As opposed to profit harvesting. Find the talent and/or find the people, in this case, who already have answers, whether you find them on Twitter or you just find them in universities and they're frustrated with life and they're not doing anything anymore except waiting to retire. But there are people that know things. Because I have a very interesting, very apropos moment to add in that I didn't expect to today, but I really would love to know your thoughts on this, Sean, from a perspective of who you are and what you potentially will be in the future. Right now, my entire subdivision, which are county roads, is being repaved with asphalt, macadam. And generally speaking, that's the same way as we have paved roads for 100 plus years. And we all know it's extremely expensive, it's petroleum based, and it's garbage. The potholes will be there. If they finish this in May, the potholes will still be there till June. Given the fact that the Don Sullivan Show is so focused on material science in so many ways, why isn't it, as I mentioned earlier in the show, and again, this falls exactly in the line here, I know in my heart that there are different materials out there that are better for both construction and for building roads that'll last a lot longer and be a lot safer. Why isn't it that they don't see the light of day?
There could be a variety of reasons. The one that comes to mind for me is that we need people making decisions who take ownership over innovation, where you enter something and you look at it and say, okay, let me go back to my color palette. Let me look at all the tools I have here. Why are we don't have to do things the same way we've done it. This doesn't make sense. That filter, I think, is often lacking. And we need to make sure that we are having leaders who operate out of that place. Because the way I would approach it is say, there's all this innovation out there. Maybe there's 20 different better ways we can do this. Let's go figure it out. Maybe there isn't, but let's take a look.
Let's find the people who have already figured it out, to go back to the point that you made so presciently. Yeah.
They're out there.
The people who,
do you think a lot of leadership is resistant to change, Sean? Do you think that's an issue with current leadership?
Well, I think it depends. There's processes of legislation which are by design slow. Mussolini got the trains running on time, but that had some adverse effects, right? So legislation, for example,
great example,
is intended to be a bit slower. But I think where an executive personality can come in and work, and what you have to do too is you have to understand the constraints. So you understand your constitutional limitations, you respect those limitations, but then you say, okay, within the scope of that, what can I do? When don't I need to go and spend 10 years building consensus, and when do I? Because you may not be able to get that consensus. So within the scope of power and authority that you have, what can you do? And then take that approach of, all right, how do I staff leadership positions with that pro-innovation mindset where I can still operate within my statutory responsibilities, but I might be thinking between the lines or thinking more creatively. Have we actually read what the statute says? Have we thought about it? And I'll tell you one thing that's great about AI is you can synthesize a lot of statutory information quickly and understand the scope of authority the way you couldn't before if you have some basic knowledge going in, right? You can't do it if you don't
know the question to ask. And if you know the question to ask, that's a natural language model right there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up AI, Sean. I was going to ask you about that. It seems like AI literacy is increasingly important, and certainly ought to be important for anyone that wants to take a leadership position. There are also concerns about AI in terms of the job market, in terms of energy consumption. What are your thoughts around all that?
Yeah, I think the common position that's coalescing in a variety of places right now is that residents should not have to subsidize the cost of corporate data centers. That seems sensible to me. It's almost like tax the externality for the user who's driving up the water and energy costs. That makes sense. As far as the technology, I find it exciting. I think there's enormous possibility with it. And I think what's going to be interesting about it is it's going to boomerang us all back to the human and the relational, because it is going to cause massive disruption. It is, and that's okay. And what's going to happen is the people who are best at connecting human to human, those are going to be the employees in demand in the future, because that our humanity, our spirit isn't going anywhere, thankfully.
We got to start taking tablets away from these kids then, get them out, get them talking.
Well, it's starting to happen. I mean, I think the amount of parents that I have talked to that have read the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his last name.
Possibly another book for the Don Sullivan Show book club, but go ahead.
Glenn Youngkin in Virginia sent that copy of that book to every legislator, and they banned cell phones in schools across Virginia, including at lunch breaks. That was a great example of a leader who reads, giving information to the legislators, and getting bipartisan consensus around a very important issue. We can be doing that's a great example of leadership. That's idea first. But the amount of parents that I mentioned that book to, and they know the book and they've read it, is like it's a majority of parents.
I haven't read it. So what's the TLDR? What's the quick cliff notes for me, Sean?
Basically, that if you and he does it in an incredibly data-driven way that shows between 2010 and 2015, once social media reached the point where the like button was prominent, when you had pre-adolescents starting to use that, it changed their entire reward cycles and connection cycles, the addictive qualities, and the mental health of the generation. And he shows this globally. So he's not just looking at like the West. He's tying it to how teen mental health declined globally when this came into play. So he's isolating a lot of confounding variables. There's some science. And the results have been catastrophic. And he has a broader context to it, but his policy positions that he recommends at the end of this book are no cell phones in your kids' hands until 16, and social media.
That is endorsed fully by the Don Sullivan Show.
Yes,
they did something like that in Australia too. No social media if you're under 16. Is that what I read?
So. That sounds familiar.
Yeah,
they've got a step further here and totally keeping cell phones, or at least smartphones, completely out of the hands of kids and allowing them to learn how to interact before they become absorbed in the matrix, basically.
And
and they can get into trouble too.
And I forget the exact words he uses, but essentially connecting with a person face to face is, I'm not going to try to butcher his words, but he has 3 examples of ways that human beings are supposed to develop and learn how to connect, and how the access to the smartphone is literally the opposite of those 3 things. It's fascinating. I recommend you check it out. I'm not going to be able to do it.
We may have a whole show on it. And maybe you can find somebody to get on here with us to actually discuss those 3 very salient points, because it is a subject that is presently, personally, very important to me. But in general, from a societal perspective, it's extremely important. So, Sean, I know you have a hard stop here, but I want to give you an opportunity that you may not want to take, because it may be a step that is contrary to your own best interests. But let's just say if you were in charge of New Jersey right now, and other than the points you made about the studies of transmission attenuation and electricity, what are one or more, if you want, of the scientific projects that at least scientifically literate legislature in the state of New Jersey might want to approach to make the lives of the people in New Jersey over the next decade better?
Let me get back to you on that. I'm not going to answer it if I'm not fully prepared to answer.
Okay, but
I'll give you the Steve Fega one. I am sick of hauling bags out of my trunk into the damn grocery stores. I want those bags back.
And the reality of that, what a great point.
They feel like they passed the cost on to me, and we just have lots of cloth bags or whatever now. Like it's driving me nuts.
I just figured out my answer, by the way.
Okay,
but I'm getting back to Steve's because I want to rant about that. Right. Go for it, Sean.
There's a lot of talk about energy costs going up, and what's amazing to me is that the regional greenhouse gas initiative that New Jersey is a part of, there's proposal. So that imposes a certain tax on the New Jersey taxpayer for, as what's the word I'm looking for? An excise of sorts on the energy bill. Of some kind. So now the proposals are some of that revenue that's under the control of the Board of Public Utilities. The proposals now to give rebates to energy payers are to come out of that fund. So it's like, well, you're just giving us some tax money back. but they don't phrase it that way. But what I'd actually be more interested in is, again, if you read the parameters of the statutes and you think about what could be possible without a whole legislative overhaul, if you actually took some of that revenue, there's $500 million just sitting unused that's been raised from that fund. And the money has to be used towards, let's say, green projects. So we've done some planting trees in urban areas and things like that. What I would like to do is actually take the 11 or 12 dams that are both at high risk of failure, and if failure occurs, will cause imminent risk of death or injury. And I would like to allocate a portion of that $500 million to fixing the dams. And maybe we do it with some green and renewable components that would satisfy the scope of the RGGI. But let's fix the dams, damn it.
On that note,
I like that.
I can't think
when
of a
the
better
levee
note.
breaks, we should be playing that Led Zeppelin song.
My rant to the actual fact that the plastic bags that people wind up buying that are 100 times as thick as the little plastic bags we used to get actually constitute more total plastic being used than before. And of course, those cloth bags actually wind up maintaining or allowing bacteria to grow in them. So when you use them multiple times to transport produce, it actually transports diseases. But this is, again, one of the problems you have when you have a scientifically illiterate legislature all the way up to the top in all of the 17,000 governments that exist in the United States. And that is actual real number.
I'm mad about the paper straws too, Don.
Oh,
I want
yeah,
plastic straws back
a whole
everywhere.
Different story. And
Me too.
that's it. But that's part of it.
5 minutes and the thing's, ugh.
I can't put my teeth around. It's just, it doesn't work.
It's wrong.
All right. So we know we have to end this episode. We're going to have Sean back on many times, I hope, as we proceed through the next 4 or 5 years, and we will be very much proponents of whatever Sean wants to do, because he is an amazing figure, and hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of this with his public successes. So, Sean, hopefully you'll keep finishing reading the book and learning all about everything that Dr. Muller wanted people to learn. And I simply say to everybody in the audience, before I get into my normal rants, that you should read this book. You should read it multiple times. I've read it 3 times, even though I have degrees in physics and math.
I will have to read it multiple times.
Astrophysics and computers. I got lots of degrees, and I read this book 3 times because, again, like our example at Rubio, it's like listening to Rubio speak. It's so easy to understand what it is that he's trying to get across. It's absolutely brilliant. It's 20 years old. It is no less relevant specifically technologically today than it was 20 years ago when I first picked it up. So hopefully, Dr. Muller, you hear this and you want to get on the show, but people go on Amazon and buy this book. It's $10, for God's sake. Go read it, okay?
I got it on Audible. I started listening to it, Don.
Yeah, okay. So, Steve, got anything else?
No, it's a pleasure to meet the man behind the Kilimanjaro episode.
That's 3 people who have been up Kilimanjaro. Sean, say goodbye to the audience for now.
Thank you.
All right.
Beloved audience.
And
I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Folks, let us remember that there is one principle that is a guiding light for your entire lives that I espouse, whether or not I'm on top of Kilimanjaro with Sean, or we're talking about the basic fundamentals of physics, or someday that I'm actually referring to him by some lofty title that he might attain somehow, as opposed to being a rich venture capitalist lawyer, which is going to happen as well. Just remember that the most important thing that you can conceive of in your life, the single guiding principle that I believe in, is that all at-bats are situational.